All right, thanks again for joining. As we kind of go over ThinManager, a part of the controls and visualization business unit of Rockwell Automation, I'm going to just do a little brief history of the ThinManager product, and then just a few slides to kind of get an introduction. And then I'm going to spend most of my time actually in the product. My goal is try to get this done in about 45 minutes. So there's a lot of information to cover. So there's a lot of things I will not be able to go into detail. But if there's anything that I go into this today and you want a little more detail, please contact us and we can just dive in a little bit deeper. There's certain areas like security and Active Directory integration that I'm not going to cover today that are also very important. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and we can cover that at a later time if you need to. So ThinManager itself actually has been on the market for a better part of 22 years. The founders of the company, founders of ACP, the ThinManager products is a company called ACP, Automation Control Products, company I worked for many years prior to our acquisition by Rockwell Automation, September 12th of 2016. Reason why I'm kind of going into a little bit of the history is because it's kind of important to understand where we started and where we are today. So 22 years ago, much like today, we were starting to see a lot of applications being deployed out into the plant floor. I might refer to those as content or productivity applications, but at that time, most of the applications being deployed were HMI applications from various HMI software developers. So there's a lot of great power and capabilities within PCs, but with all this power and capabilities became a lot of challenges. So with each PC we were deploying out in the plant floor, we had to worry about managing the operating system, loading the applications and all the licensing. How do we do patch fixes, virus protection? You had a lot of moving parts. You know, you might have a spinning hard drive. You had fans to keep that large workstation cool. And then even to this day, we have to worry about who's accessing those USB ports on those PCs. Now, can you manage all those challenges? Yes, you can. But what was happening yesterday and today is what we call PC sprawl. So now we're not just managing a few PCs, we're starting to deploy many PCs to host those productivity applications. So now what used to take a little bit of time, now we're spending a large amount of our time managing and maintaining all those PCs that are hosting those productivity applications. So we looked at this challenge and said, why are we taking advantage of server-based computing? At that time was Microsoft Terminal Services. Citrix was available as well. So why don't we centralize all of our applications on a few servers, and we'll replace the end devices where we would typically have a PC connected to the keyboard, the mouse, the display. We're going to replace those end devices with Thin clients. Easy to manage, easy to maintain, very secure, very reliable Thin clients. So we're going to centralize the applications on a few servers and deploy Thin clients as the end device. So now, again, just managing a few PCs, the end devices we're not managing at all. And the operators get a full Windows experience without all the challenges of maintaining those Windows boxes. So where would I use a Thin client or a mobile device managed by ThinManager? Really anywhere that you would typically deploy any productivity applications out in your plant floor. It could be an HMI or OIT application on the machine or by the piece of equipment or in your work cell. It could be a control room environment. It might be maybe some engineering workstations in the maintenance office. You might want to start providing your knowledge workers, those operators, supervisors, with mobile devices. So ThinManager is a great technology for deploying and managing all those tethered terminals as well as those mobile devices. So Thin clients, really anywhere you would typically have PCs. So as I get through the product, I'm going to kind of highlight these four topics of boosting productivity, enhancing visualization, extending the security, and then smart mobility. So as I refer back to these, I'll kind of get into some details of where this might be of some value. So remote desktop services. This is really the most technical part of the presentation I'm going to get into today. But 22 years ago and even today, many of our customers are utilizing Microsoft Remote Desktop Services to host their productivity applications. So I might have a primary remote desktop server and a secondary remote desktop server. Again, since you're no longer using a PC as your end device that has a desktop environment where you have an operating system, you have a desktop, you're loading your applications, now I'm going to use a multi-user environment of Microsoft Remote Desktop Services to host those applications, to host those licenses and those users. So in this simple picture, I have 5 boxes, 5 OITs or HMIs. So instead of having those licenses loaded on the desktop here, I'm now going to have those licenses and those clients loaded on my server. So 22 years ago, when we came up with this concept or this idea, our customers said, nah, there's no way I'm going to actually rely on a server to host all my applications. And if that server fails, now I have 5 displays that do not have access to the HMI. If I have a PC, if one goes out, I have 4 others that I could view. So we came up with the concept of having a secondary remote desktop server. I said we didn't come up with that concept. We knew it existed, but how do we actually automate the failover from that primary to that secondary server? So that was one of the key things that we created from a failover perspective 22 years ago, and it's still extremely important aspect of our product when you're deploying those high availability productivity applications. As I mentioned earlier, one might refer to content or productivity applications. So what exactly does that mean? So out in the plant floor, in what we now call the OT space, not IT, where you would have more of an office environment, and the OT space, the space that we are focused on, there's a lot of content that we are now deploying out into the plant floor. Most of those can be Windows-based applications. So I'm going to toss a few acronyms out here: a human-machine interface, a manufacturing execution system. And what are we using to track production, OEE applications, really all those productivity applications that I have. It could be a maintenance management application. A lot of customers are deploying those maintenance applications for doing preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance, tracking parts. ERP, like an SAP, something that we're using from enterprise resource planning application. So these are all Windows-based applications that are hosted on some type of Windows platform. Again, typically it's remote desktop services. It could be virtual desktop infrastructure or VDI. So if there's any Windows-based applications we have the connections to that content with ThinManager. Web content, we're starting to see a proliferation of applications utilizing a web server, right? So I'm going to host my productivity applications on a web server. I'm not using any type of Windows platform whatsoever. It might be my HMI application. It might be an MES application. Again, you're not hosting it on a Windows platform. You're hosting it on a web server. So ThinManager has the connections to those web servers. It could be an IP or USB-based camera, not necessarily for security, but really mostly for adding additional visibility into that plant floor. It's kind of one of those 4 things we talked about: enhancing visualization. Terminal shadows, really whatever a user would see on their screen or their piece of glass, if that's their HMI they're looking at, whatever that operator sees, another terminal can actually view that, whether that be a thin client terminal or a mobile device. A panel view, or any panel product or any device that supports VNC. So any VNC source can be content to us. So this is content that ThinManager can connect to. Think of it as your internal cloud of information. Not necessarily hosted on some external cloud, but on your premises, you're going to host all these applications. Now I've created this internal cloud of information. Now it's really easy for me to move that around. What do I mean by that? So think about all this content being now, you can see it on multiple types of devices. It could be an industrial hardened thin client. It could be a commercial grade thin client. There's other names for those, zero clients, but it's just as thin client itself has no hard drive, no operating system, no moving media, very, very lightweight. It could be a mobile device, Android, iOS platform, or the Windows platform. We have applications for those. Or it could even be a PC where you might have an operator, it could be an operator, but it could be an engineer where they're typically using their PCs or the laptops to host other applications. Maybe it's, their Outlook account, or maybe they're like a CAD drawing application, but you might want to have the users of those PCs that have access to that content. So we can deliver it to many types of devices, and I'll get into that in more detail. We can also deliver it to many types of users based on their profile or permissions. Who are you, and can you have access to that application? So delivering any of that content in your internal cloud to any of those devices based on your users. So you may not have specific devices for specific users. You can have generic devices, and anybody that walks up or grabs that device, they must first log in with the proper credentials to actually have access to any of that content. And then lastly, kind of four things we talked about, was just referring to earlier, smart mobility. So now I can say, I'm going to grab that mobile device, whatever I choose. We're not going to force you into a platform. And then the user is going to log in with their permissions. Now, ThinManager knows who you are. And now we can take advantage of indoor positioning systems like Bluetooth beacons or Wi-Fi access points to determine that physical location. Those are passive resolvers, meaning passively I can walk from location to location, and as my Bluetooth enabled device comes within range of that Bluetooth signal or that Wi-Fi access point, ThinManager has a pretty good idea of where you are, and then we take advantage of QR codes, quick response codes, to determine even more finite information. So again, I'm going to refer back to this as content, delivering it to devices, users, and locations. ThinManager is an application, a software application that is typically loaded on one or two of your servers in your environment. Typically, they're going to be on separate physical servers. Could be in a virtualized environment, but what we're going to provide you is the ability to have a primary and a secondary or redundant thin server, because this application server is really important that it is available. If it's not available, the primary fails, or the server fails, or the network is disconnected, whatever it may be, you're going to have a synchronized pair. So when those thin clients need to boot up, or you need to log in a user, we can actually query those credentials. Once we connect to that content, the application server, ThinManager, does not have to be loaded on the servers that are hosting the applications. You don't have to have any type of agents or anything. We're just going to connect to that content, have permissions, and then we're going to deliver it out to those devices, users, and locations. So ThinManager is extremely critical, but it is not a conduit. I won't go into a lot of details, but conceivably, both thin servers could go away, and you still would be quite functional. The key part to this discussion moving forward will be the idea that these are managed thin clients. These thin clients have no hard drive, no operating system. So how do we provide it with intelligence? Well, it's a managed device. So you're going to go into the configuration of this thin client and into its BIOS. You're going to set it up. You might use static. You might use DHCP to connect to the network. Those would be ThinManager ready devices, devices like this Allen Bradley VersaView 5200 terminal. It could be a commercial grade thin client. I'll actually bring up my camera and I'll show you what those look like. But they are both very common, meaning that they do not have an operating system to manage. So it needs to download our firmware. It's a network boot technology. Download the firmware to that thin client, and it makes connections to that client, to the content. Thin clients, why would I do that? Well, there's a lot of value proposition, but one of the bigger ones is reducing your total cost of ownership, because time is money. Not only is time money, but there's not a lot of time these days. So if I could do more with less, that's important. More so now than ever, I should say, even with the challenges we have from COVID. Even prior to that, our customers are saying, I need to do more with less. I don't have enough people. I can't find qualified people. So I need to free up my time. I don't need to mess with PCs anymore. So using ThinClients frees up that time, which is money. Also, again, we get into boosting productivity. I can do more with less, not only from an administrative standpoint, but I can do more with less with those knowledge workers, like our maintenance staff. We want to make them more efficient users of information. Security is extremely important. These devices, when you unplug them, there is no intellectual property. This is really a doorstop or maybe at best a weapon. But if someone were to steal this, it is a worthless device. There's nothing they can do with it. I'll refer back to this a little bit more, but from a security perspective, all the USB ports are disabled by default. So a user cannot plug in a mass storage device. I had numerous customers prior to using ThinManager where inadvertently or maliciously a user would plug a mass storage device into a PC, maybe a SCADA network, and now my entire SCADA network has denial of service virus or some type of virus that shuts down their facility. So that is an important area to look at when you're evaluating your current processing out on the plant floor. Again, ThinClients, very secure, very reliable. Again, we'll get into productivity as I step through the product itself. All right, so let me go ahead and jump into the application. Before I do that, let me go ahead and pull up my camera, and this will help me kind of show you what I have. So I'm going to use an application called Air Server. Sometimes this Air Server application can be a little bit challenging. There we go. What Air Server does, it gives me the ability to shadow my iPad that I have in my hand right now. So this is just a standard iPad. I'm going to go ahead and unlock it. Okay. And I'm just going to go over here, and I'm going to turn on my camera. Oops, I'm already connected there. I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what I have running. So this is my server. This is an Intel NUC mini server. And this is where all of my Windows-based content, including ThinManager, is being hosted using VMware. I have a wired infrastructure here, and part of that wired infrastructure, I have my Stratic switch here, and connected to that network, I have a VersaView 5200 ThinClient, very similar to the one I just shared with you earlier. Okay, and then connected to that display, that ThinClient, I have an HID badge reader from RF Ideas, and then that ThinClient is connected to a single monitor, which is you see up here. And I want to get into a little more detail of what you see connected. So again, this piece of glass of this monitor is using what we call virtual screens. And a virtual screen is the ability to share multiple types of content on a single piece of glass or display. So over here, you have a camera pointing at my window of my office. You have a shadow of a panel view. You have a shadow of another terminal called plant floor, which you'll see in a second. And then you have a factory talk USE screen or just our client running. And then this is a logo, but maybe you might use alarm screens or something. All right, so again, single monitor ThinClient connected to that display. All right, this is a Intel NUC ThinClient. It's not a mini server. It's truly just a ThinClient. So I'm just going to take that off. So this kind of gives you an idea of what a commercial grade ThinClient would look like. So I'm showing you that I have a mixed environment of commercial grade ThinClients as well as industrial grade ThinClients. This is one of our small form factor single monitor, single network ThinClients from Allen & Bradley, our VersaView 5200 terminals. So these are the two ThinClients that I have connected. VersaView 5200 is the name you're going to see in a minute, and that's called Plant Floor, the Plant Floor terminal. Also connected to that network, I have just a standard Panel View Plus, and that's network backed, and then ThinManager is connecting to that content. That content is that panel view screen. I have here just a camera, which will be pointing out there. Also, just some props that I'm going to use. This, when I was talking about earlier, relevance or passive resolvers, this is just a standard USB Bluetooth beacon. So when I plug that beacon into my Thin client, it's powered, and that beacon is going to create a geo fence. It's going to create a Bluetooth fence in this area. You know, it might be 3 inches, it might be 3 feet, excuse me. It might be 3 meters, it might be 3 feet. It depends on how much strength you use. All right, I'm also going to get into, here's an HID badge. So I'm going to use that for HID badge readers. And then this is, we refer back to this as well. And these are some QR codes, quick response codes. And you're going to see those in use as I get into the product. Okay, so that is just a little overview. This is my laptop that I'm using, or to show ThinManager. Okay, so VMware. I'm going to connect to VMware just to kind of give you an idea of what I have running to run all this. So I'm using VMware. We are not advocating for VMware. It could be really any virtualization technology that you would like to use. So ThinManager can be located on any virtualization technology. The important part is it has to be, or should be, a Windows server platform for larger systems. So I have 3 servers running. I have a server called DC, which is a domain controller. I have a server called HMI and a server called RDS. Those are just the names of the servers. So I'm going to go ahead and make a connection to that server, RDS. So I'm going to go ahead and open up remote desktop services, RDP connection to the 10.6.10.51 server. And that's going to be my RDS server. That's the IP address. I'm going to go ahead and connect, logging in. Okay, so now I'm on the desktop of that server, which is just so happens to be hosting ThinManager, which is the user interface. So one of the things that you're going to quickly see here is called administrative shadowing. So as an administrator, I can highlight any terminal I have in my facility and shadow that. So there's a tab up here called Shadow. So now I can sit in my office, or I could be remotely. I can remote into that server using a VPN, and now I can help troubleshoot. So our customers love this. They can, quickly have access to the system. They can help troubleshoot. They can help do commissioning. They can help do training without physically being by that asset or that HMI. Now more so than ever, with social distancing requirements, this is an extremely important capability of our product. We did not create it for that, but we really created it for efficiencies, right? I need to quickly troubleshoot or train somebody. I don't need to be there. But with these new restrictions on social distancing, this is a really important capability. I can also kind of go back, look at event logs of that terminal. Again, this is a physical terminal that was that Intel NUC Thin client. I can look at what happened, who logged in, who logged out, what type of information do I need. I can look at the properties of that Thin client terminal, manufacturer, what type of load percentage I'm using. So again, maybe something slow. I can say, this thing is at 0.15%. I think everything should be fine. All right, so let me go over to the next terminal, which is the VersaView 5200 terminal. And that is that Allen Bradley industrial hardened Thin client. Same thing, properties. This Thin client is using quite a bit of processing power because I have video, I'm shadowing things. So it's really consuming a lot of processing power because I'm asking it to do a lot. I can also shadow that terminal. So again, kind of that idea of what is, as an administrator, I can see exactly what the operator sees. So again, as I showed you on the camera earlier, this is what's called a virtual screen. And a virtual screen gives the user the ability to see multiple types of content simultaneously on a single pane of glass. We actually look at this technology as being a substitution for our multi-monitor Thin clients, which I'll cover in a second. But now with large format TVs, 4K monitors, you might not need multiple monitors. You can just have a large format display. So you have your canvas. So think of this maybe it's a 100-inch TV would be your canvas. And then you as an administrator create these virtual screens. And the operator has the ability to move those virtual screens around. So a lot of flexibility of how you want to see things. So I'm gonna go ahead down the lower right-hand side. You'll see I have my camera pointing at my dog's chair. That's where he normally sleeps, but I shoot him out of the office for now. And that's just the front of my office. So again, think of this as, maybe I might have a camera pointing at a remote area of the facility where the operator might typically have to go there. Maybe they might have to climb 4 stories to a mezzanine to see the top of a tank. Well, now I can put a high resolution IP camera, and now the operator can see that camera on the same piece of glass as their HMI. So as the user wants to move this around, so maybe I want to go ahead and see that panel view shadow. So I'm going to move that around, and then ThinManager scales that virtual screen to fit into that area. So that's another important aspect of our product, is how we can scale those applications. So if this FactoryTalk View SE application wasn't developed to fit into this screen, we're going to scale it to fit, so you don't have to go back and re-engineer that HMI application. So this is a FactoryTalk View SE session running back on my server, and the operator or the knowledge worker can interface with that application independently of all this other content. So I'm going to go and bring this top right-hand corner is a shadow of the plant floor. It's really, what am I seeing right now is what the operator on the other terminal would be seeing. There are a tremendous amount of business cases of where customers are using these to enhance their visualization. Again, you might have a long production line, and you have a senior operator in the front of the line and a junior operator in the end of the line. And that senior operator is training that new operator. So they might say, the junior operator might say, hey, Jamie, I need you to shadow my terminal and help me here. I'm kind of confused. So now that senior operator can shadow that terminal and see what's happening. I have customers using this where they might have a control room or a war room, or whatever you want to call it, where they might have this large format display, and you might have a bunch of these where it's just shadowing a bunch of terminals out in your production area. One of my customers calls it their poor man dashboard. So now I can see multiple types of information out on the plant floor without creating a new application. Again, I could shadow, maybe I have a production lines, like 8 production lines. I want to shadow all the panel views on those production lines. So a lot of value in this, again, because the idea is I've got this internal cloud of content. Since it's virtualized, now I can move it from device and location pretty simply. All right, so I'm not going to step through everything because just of interest of time, but you need to connect to the servers that are hosting that content. So the HMI applications, all my productivity applications are hosted on one of these 2 servers. I have cameras. I'm connecting to the panel view. So again, I won't step through each one of those. All right, so a display client is really what will the user see when they, view on their piece of glass, right? If I turn on a Thin client, which content will I see? If I log into a terminal, which content will I see? So these are remote desktop services. So we have a bunch of FactoryTalk View SE and ME applications. So this is a FactoryTalk View SE application. And what I'm showing you is the ability to have that one application have access on 2 servers, a primary and a secondary server. So I'm going to just step through this configuration wizard. Again, I've already connected to the server that's hosting these SE client applications and licenses. So now I'm going to step in and I'm going to connect directly to that application. So one thing we're not going to give our operators, you can, but most customers don't, is a desktop. We'll give them that desktop experience without a desktop. So how do we do that? We do that with our technology called Application Link, or App Link, where we're going to link specifically to that desktop, that session, start the executable, and down to a specific file and location. So that application SE is available on .51 and .50. I have it set up in an instant failover configuration, meaning that when the Thin client boots up, it's going to start both sessions simultaneously. And this is App Link, where I'm going to start the executable and then go down into a specific program pass file name. So SE, I'm getting a specific CLI file. Okay, so a bunch of SE applications. You could have logics. We're seeing more and more customers saying, you know what, I do want to actually host these applications. I don't want to have logics with a bunch of laptops with the licenses. I want to actually centralize all my logics and all my applications and all my licensing on a server or servers. So we're going to app link that factory talk, Logix is hosted on the .50 server, and then I'm going to start logicsdesigner.exe, and then I can even get it down to a specific ACD file location. That'll make sense as I start delivering content based on location. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep on running here. So I've connected to content. I showed you these terminals, and I'm showing you content that was delivered to those terminals. I'm just going to step through real quick, configuring these terminals. Again, this is a specific terminal profile. As you step through that profile, it steps you through the configuration. It's an Allen Bradley. The model number is 6200. That's the MAC address. So when that Thin client booted up, it downloaded its firmware and its configuration. And at that point, ThinManager said, okay, you physical device with that MAC address, from this point forward, when you boot up, you receive that VersaView 5200 terminal profile. And this profile is what I'm creating right now. As an administrator, can you shadow that terminal? Bunch of options, yes, no, ask me, warn me. Can you interact? Do I have write capabilities? Yes, you do. Do I want to create a multi-monitor Thin client? So right now, it's just a single monitor Thin client. With the appropriate Thin client, we can support up to 7 monitors, 7 4K video outputs. So if I want to add a monitor to that multi-monitor Thin client, I just select. So, what is it that you want to add? I'll add another terminal, another monitor. How many monitors do you want? And just keep on adding those. Let's keep it simple at 5. And then you can choose a layout. Okay. You can also freehand move those around. And then once you've created that multi-monitor Thin client, I'm going to maybe mount this monitor on my desk, and I want to put these 4 monitors up on the wall or maybe in the console. And then you step through and start assigning content to each one of those displays. Again, it's a single keyboard, a single mouse, up to 7 displays. And wherever that cursor is located is the active display. So if you have any control rooms, if you're building a control room or if you have control rooms and you're evaluating ThinManager, there is no other technology that can create a control room environment. With the combination of virtual screens and multi-monitor, it is unparalleled. One of my customers said, you've transformed the way we do control rooms. I've heard that term quite a bit lately. I've had another pharmaceutical customer tell me that ThinManager has helped them transform their business. That business is manufacturing pharmaceuticals. So it's kind of fun to hear that, after 22 years, almost 20 years of selling ThinManager, hearing the term transformative. But what I'm sharing with you is a product that, again, has been developed over 22 years. So there is a tremendous amount of capabilities that have been built into this product. And most of those capabilities were actually capabilities that our customers wanted us to design into the system, okay? So some of those things would be modules. So if I showed you in the camera earlier an RFID's prox module. So we need to add that module, basically a driver, so that Thin client can read that peripheral device. We might add touchscreens. I could spend a lot of time talking about modules, but I'm gonna go ahead and just show you a couple. I need to add a touchscreen driver. So lots of touchscreens that we support here, okay? Again, a lot of little things start adding up, and I just don't have enough time to go into it, but modules are great. Okay, so I've created this profile for this terminal called VersaView 5200. When that Thin client boots up, that is the content that you see here. We can also deliver content to users based on their profile or permissions. So I might have a group here called administration. We have Adam, you have Anna. I have a maintenance group, Mark and Matt. I'll refer back to these characters in a little bit. So let me take a look at the configuration of that maintenance group. So I do have the ability to integrate with Active Directory. So I've created a group called maintenance. And if you're part of that maintenance group, you receive the maintenance work order. And again, you could be part of the maintenance group and you say, yep, you know what, I want actually, I don't have it here, but maybe you want the Rockwell Automation's Asset Center, which is our change management software. So maybe I say I want to have Asset Center, or maybe I want to have Logix, maybe whatever it is you want, whatever content we've connected to, you can now associate to that user or group of users. Okay, let's just take a look at Mark specifically. So Mark is a specific user, and we're going to integrate him with Active Directory. So whatever his Active Directory information is, we're actually going to have him coordinate with that. Biometrics. So we support fingerprint readers. We are working on biometrics like facial recognition, corneal retinal scans. We have another biometric we support called NIMI. NIMI basically takes the EKG of the unique user and associates that to that's their biometric. So they wear a NIMI band. Anybody's interested, NYMI, I believe is the name. And you wear that is your biometric. So when you wear that bracelet, that is going to measure your EKG. And now that's from henceforward, as a user, Jamie Blanchard, this is my EKG. I walk up to a terminal. I want to log in. I just go ahead and tap my NIMI band to that NFC reader. And now we know who you are. Again, look at today's challenges we have. I believe NIMI is going to be really important because a lot of people are going to be wearing their PPEs. Even if you're not in pharmaceutical, maybe there's going to be a point in time where if you're a food and beverage, you're going to need to wear PPE. You're going to wear masks. You're going to need to wear shields. You're going to need to wear gloves. You're going to need to wear, some type of Tyvek suit. So how do I log you in if I can't take your thumbprint or I can't read your face? And I don't want the challenges of having to remember username and password. So it's something to think about. And I know we've developed it, not necessarily for what we're dealing with today, but it's technology that you can take advantage of to really streamline your automation and meet the unique requirements of our industry. So let me go ahead and show you how I'm going to log in as a user. So let me go ahead and shadow that terminal, VersaView 52. Let me just shadow this terminal. There's less content to look at. So again, this terminal, all it has is that application called Cookie Mixer 1920. So I'm going to walk up to that terminal. I'm Mark. So I'm changed characters. I'm no longer Jamie. I'm now Mark. I'm going to walk up and I'm going to badge in. I remember that HID badge. When I badge in, now Mark is associated to that terminal. So now as an administrator, I can see who's logged in and I can see which content we've added to that terminal. So this is called multi-sessioning, and we're going to go ahead and tile that multi-session content. So now I can see my HMI screen or my HMI application next to the work order system. Okay, I'm done. I badge out, and Anna is a different user. She's going to badge in. And now I have ThinManager. So again, Anna or Mark, they don't have to have a laptop dedicated to them or even a mobile device. Whatever terminal they walk in front of, they can log in or badge in into those devices. Okay, Anna's done. She badges out. And we're going to remove that content. So device content by user is really important to a lot of our customers today. They want to really track and trace who has access to applications. They want to restrict access to users. I have customers that will actually have a clear display or thin client that has no content associated to it. It isn't until the user logs in that we actually can receive some content. I won't go into how you do that, but it's fairly simple. I shared that with one of my customers last week, and he was floored how easy it was to do that. All right, another important factor, how easy it is to replace a thin client. So let me go ahead and quickly get that. I'm going to bring my camera back on, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to replace a thin client. Okay, I'm going to bring back the air server. Sometimes, again, it's a little picky. Sometimes I just have to be patient too. There it goes. I'm going to turn my camera back on. All right. Here's a fun thing about this demo. It's real, it's live, it's active. I have real things. I have a real dog outside of my door trying to get in. So trying to keep him at bay. So here's this Thin client here. I have the Intel NUC Thin client, and I'm going to go ahead and fail it. How am I going to do that? I'm just going to unplug it. So I'm going to unplug the Thin client. It's a little more challenging than I thought. So we get a little better angle here. Okay. So the Thin client failed, and then the administrator is going to see that that failure has occurred. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that Thin client. So anybody that can disconnect and reconnect cables can replace a Thin client. So I went back to spares, and I had this Intel NUC sitting in there, so I'll go ahead and replace that like for like. I could replace that Intel NUC with this VersaView 5200 terminal. They are compatible with each other. You might say, you know what, I have this commercial Thin client. I'm just going to have it, when it fails, I'm just going to replace it with a better industrial hardened Thin client. All right, so I'm going to disconnect and reconnect all those cables. I'm going to plug it back in, make sure everything's plugged in. Keyboard, mouse, display, network. All right, I'm going to go ahead and power it on. And the Thin client's going to boot up. And when the Thin client boots up, I'm going to bring this over so you can see it a little more effectively. So the Thin client's going to boot up. It's going to step through the process. Now this is using what's called a PXE or PXE boot, and it's downloading its firmware. Okay. And what's going to happen is the Thin client's going to boot up. It's going to connect to the network, going to go back to the ThinManager server, and the ThinManager server is going to say, I don't know who you are. I don't recognize your MAC address. So we didn't have this terminal, this new spare Thin client associated to any profile. So it's saying, do you want to create a new terminal or replace the failed Thin client? So again, I have a group called Wired and a group called Wireless. That's part of my Wired group. So if I hit Wired, select it, and it says this terminal is undefined on server, choose terminal to replace. So I'm going to use the plant floor terminal. That's the server that, that's the Thin client that failed. So you might actually put a label on here called plant floor. When the user replaces it, it's pretty simple, right? Oh, which terminal is it? Oh, it's plant floor. That's the label that's on there. And hit plant floor. So it's actually configured to run a different package. So it's going to actually reboot that Thin client, but this is all automatic. Okay, this took me, once it reboots and connects to the content, might take me 2 to 4 minutes, 4 to 8 minutes. Talking to customers over the last 20 years, I've been selling ThinManager. It's not uncommon to see 4 to 8 hours to replace a Thin client. A PC, not a Thin client. So this really reduces the amount of time, mean time to repair. And if this happens at night, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and you don't have an IT person there or somebody that's really knowledgeable, anybody can really disconnect, reconnect cables and follow that process. So it's fairly easy to accomplish. Again, that's one of the things we want to make sure is everything is automated as possible. So there we go. That Thin client was replaced in 4 to 8 minutes, probably 4 minutes. I could replace it with that other Thin client. So now I'm going to get into mobility, and I'm just going to keep this camera on. I think I just took a photo. All right, well, that'll be fun to look at later. So I'm going to keep that camera on just to kind of review what I'm going to share with you in a minute. So let me go ahead and full screen. Oops. So I'm going to refer back to this in a minute. These are my QR codes. Again, a Bluetooth beacon. I don't have it plugged in, but I'm not going to use Bluetooth for this demonstration. Again, I'm going to refer back to that panel view. I'm probably going to refer back to this plant floor terminal as well. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So I'm Mark. I've got my iPad, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. So I launched the ITMC client, iOS ThinManager client. And basically ThinManager said, hey, I don't see your Bluetooth beacon. It's true because I don't have it plugged in. So I'm Mark, a maintenance person. So when I log in, I get work order. Perfect. So now as I walk around, it's not important that I be at a specific location to have access to that maintenance work order. But I'm walking around and I get somebody calls me on the radio and says, hey, Mark, I'm over at that labeling zone. We've been having some problems with that asset. And Mark's like, yeah, let me go. I'm going to walk over. Give me a couple minutes. But Mark doesn't have to go back to his office to get his laptop so he can plug into the processor and do some troubleshooting. He knows he's using ThinManager. So if he scans this QR code or quick response code, it's actually going to go grab Logix, and it's going to deliver a very specific ACD file for that controller. So now I have a fully functioning Logix connected to the controller on my network. Now I can quickly troubleshoot and understand what's happening. Okay, so this is a fully functioning networked Logix, but it was restricted to that user based on his profile and even his location. So not anybody can do this. So I'm done. I leave, I fix the problem, and I'm a busy guy. There's a lot of stuff going on today in this plant. So I get another call. Someone's like, hey, Mark, I'm over at the packing zone. We're having some challenges over here. And that pump's making some noise again. So I've got this pump, it's been problematic. There's a couple things, you got the drives, you got a couple of things that could possibly be wrong. So I'm gonna scan this QR code that's associated to that asset. And I'm gonna go grab some information that might help me troubleshoot. What I've done here is I've digitized as much information I can about that asset. So once it's digitized, I can actually start delivering that content to that user based on their location. So now I can quickly troubleshoot. I don't have to go back to the office, find the binder that has that information. I have it at my fingertips. When talking to customers, you're probably saying, whoa, that's a lot of work. How the heck do I do all that? Well, you don't do it all at once, like everything. You start looking at the areas of opportunity that will bring the most value. So maybe you say, I'm gonna start digitizing as much information about this asset because maybe it's complex or maybe it's old, and maybe Frank, the senior operator, has been here for 30 years and he knows how to work it. But let's go ahead and maybe video Frank doing standard operating procedures. So that is actually an interesting opportunity. One of my customers, that's what they do. From a digitization standpoint, they're trying to video processes as much as possible. So what they do is, again, they have QR codes, and when they scan those QR codes, they're going to bring content, maybe a video of that. All right. I'm going to leave. And all right, let's keep Mark going. He's a busy guy. So Mark goes to another asset, and they said, hey, Mark, I need some help. I've got this panel view over here, okay? And I need to do some troubleshooting. And Mark's typically, without ThinManager and his mobile device, you might have an operator in front of this panel view screen, and then he would actually go out to the asset and do maintenance. But with ThinManager, I know that if I scan this QR code, so I have a QR code, maybe it's connected or it's taped to the controls cabinet right next. So if I scan that QR code, I'm actually going to shadow that panel view. So now I don't need two people to troubleshoot. I can tell the operator, hey, why don't you go over to the other asset and help troubleshoot, maybe do some work over there while I troubleshoot this asset. So now Mark has that panel view screen on his mobile device based on his profile and his permissions. So he has a fully functioning panel view screen on his little handy dandy iPad. Okay, so I'm going to leave and I'm going to log off. There's a lot of things left I can show you, but in interest of time, I'm not going to do that. I have Anna, who's an administrator. She's logged in. And when she logs in, she gets ThinManager, because that's the asset, that's the productivity application she needs. So we have, again, very deliberately delivering what she needs to do her job. So Anna's been, you know what? I really would like to shadow that panel view. That would really be important. But she doesn't really need to do that because that's not part of her job. But she wants to see if she can do it. So she scans that QR code, and ThinManager says, nope, you weren't given permissions to have access to that shadow. That's not part of your core responsibility. I log off, and I'm done. So that is ThinManager. ThinManager, again, you can start, I say, with a more of a tethered terminal environment where I have a bunch of thin clients. And then maybe from an evolutionary standpoint, you want to start getting involved and start doing more from a mobility platform. ThinManager we're constantly evolving. I would say we are probably 5 to 10 years in front of most technologies. That's the way we've been doing this for years. So when you invest in ThinManager, you're investing for the future. So thank you very much and have a great day.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Now I think what we'd like to do is open up the lines here for anyone who has questions. I already see something coming through on the chat. Let me pull that up here. Give me just 1 second. Let's see here. How does ThinManager help if I already use Microsoft Terminal services and commercial non-managed Thin clients?
So that's a great question. So ThinManager is built on some core Office technology like Microsoft Remote Desktop Services, like VMware or virtualization technology. What we do is we take that Office technology and provide an OT solution. So I mean, as you can see, as I went through my presentation, ThinManager adds capabilities to an Office technology that's more in line with unique requirements of manufacturing or OT in the OT space. So take something that's a great technology like Microsoft, like VMware, like Citrix, but really make sure it fits the unique requirements of industrial automation. Same thing with commercial grade thin clients. I have a very, very large food and beverage customer that has been using ThinManager for many years. Probably about 8 years ago, they came to us and said, hey, listen, I love ThinManager. We're using it with all these great industrial hardened ThinManager ready thin clients, but I have thousands upon thousands of commercial grade thin clients. They use Dell Wise and HP thin clients throughout my 440 facilities. I'd like to manage those the same way I manage the industrial thin clients. So now that company is, we came up with the idea of using Pixie Boot to boot those thin clients, and now they're using ThinManager in 420 of their 440 plants. The other 20, they just haven't deployed it yet.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Inga, for the question. Here's another one coming through. Does ThinManager only work on Rockwell FactoryTalk software platforms?
Nope, that's another great question. So ThinManager is a neutral platform. As long as that application can be hosted on some type of Windows platform. So, I mean, I'll throw some companies out there. There's companies like Wonderware or InTouch. There's SAP. I have a large group of customers using ThinManager with competitive DCS systems like Delta V. So it could be, like I mentioned, SAP. It has nothing to do with Rockwell, right? They're just using ThinManager to deploy that SAP screen out into the plant floor using maybe it's HR or maybe it is a SAP MES application.
Gotcha. Thank you, David, for the question. All right. Any other questions for anyone? I'll give it another quick second here. Would also like to mention Kelvin Pyle is the specialist in California. So if anybody does have questions, I already see Kelvin has been answering a couple on the chat as well. So if anybody has anything for him in that market, that is your go-to. At this moment, Jamie, I don't see any more questions. So if anybody else has anything, please feel free to reach out to myself or your other Rexel representative. With that said, I thank Jamie for his time today. Thank everyone else for their time as well, and hope that you'll join us next week at 10 as we discuss improving manufacturing productivity through quality asset management. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Bye now.